controversial comments. The Senate Minority Leader is facing heavy criticism for his remarks regarding two Supreme Court justices following oral arguments in an abortion case. Fighting coronavirus. Lawmakers are considering ways to combat the outbreak in the United States. We're at the White House. Fighting for the faithful. An update on the effort to protect Christians in one West African country. And the church in China. Pope Francis releases his prayer intention for the month of March. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, March 5th, 2020. Good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. Progressive Senator Elizabeth Warren has dropped out of the race to be the Democratic nominee for president. In an announcement earlier today in Cambridge, Massachusetts, Warren thanked her supporters.
I say this with a deep sense of gratitude for every single person who got in this fight, every single person who tried on a new idea, every single person who just moved a little in their notion of what a president of the United States should look like.
The one-time frontrunner failed to win a single state on Super Tuesday. She also finished third in her home state of Massachusetts. Warren is a supporter of abortion and same-sex marriage. Shortly after the news broke, President Donald Trump weighed in, saying on social media, quote, Elizabeth Pocahontas Warren, who was going nowhere except into Mini Mike's head, just dropped out of the Democrat primary 3 days too late. She cost Crazy Bernie at least Massachusetts, Minnesota, and Texas, probably cost him the nomination. Came in third in Massachusetts. And stay with EWTN News Nightly for comprehensive coverage of the race to the White House. We'll have reports and analysis in the weeks and months to come on air and on Facebook and Twitter. And for those of you counting, we are 243 days away from Election Day. Billions of dollars are on the way to help battle the coronavirus. Lawmakers signed off on a bill today that now heads to the president's desk. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, the U.S. Senate has passed an $8.3 billion measure to fight the coronavirus, which has impacted all corners of the globe.
As countries across the globe continue to battle the coronavirus, squads in hazmat suits spraying disinfectant are not an uncommon sight. In the U.S., officials ordered the cruise ship, the Grand Princess, to hold off the California coast to await testing of those aboard after a passenger on an earlier voyage died. Meanwhile, Vice President Pence continues leading the administration's battle against the virus.
We do have about 1.5 million test kits going out as we speak to hospitals, particularly hospitals in areas that have seen coronavirus cases.
The U.S. has seen more than 100 coronavirus cases, and ultimately the goal regarding testing for it is this.
We want to get to a place where any American who has a concern is able to go to their doctor, is able to go to a medical clinic and know that there's a coronavirus available. We think we can get there in a matter of weeks.
Elsewhere across the globe, the virus is impacting everyday life. In Italy, parents and grandparents with children flocked Rome's playgrounds and parks today after the government closed down schools across the country to stop the spread of the virus.
Here in the U.S., the Seattle area has been hardest hit, 70 confirmed cases, 10 deaths. And by the way, part of that $8.3 billion will be used for things like vaccines, testing, and potential treatments. Tracy?
Correspondent Owen Jensen reporting from the White House tonight. Thank you again. Joining me now from Capitol Hill is Congressman Jody Hice, Republican from Georgia. He is also a member of the House Committee on Oversight and Reform. Congressman, welcome back to the show. I know the House voted yesterday to pass the more than $8 billion emergency coronavirus package. What do you see as the most critical or immediate needs and how this funding can help?
Well, you know, really it's twofold. Number one, we want to make sure that funding, adequate funding, is available to go to states as they need it. And so there's significant amounts of funding here, I believe in the ballpark of $900 million that are available for grants to go to states as they need it. And of course, they are the ones who are on the ground, so to speak, with individuals with coronavirus. And then the other side of much of the funding goes to the medical personnel and those who are trying to find out more about coronavirus and how to effectively treat it. So it's a kind of a two-pronged approach for those who are infected in the states that need it, and at the same time trying to aggressively address those who are trying to find cures and remedies.
Congressman, what do you think of the federal response so far, and do you think that we could do things better?
You know, there's always things, I suppose, that could be improved, but when you look at this, coronavirus was barely even getting started a month ago when the president put restrictions on flights to and from China, and the precautions that they took early in this have really been, they are proving now to have been just a fantastic decision from this administration. Otherwise, no question at this point, we would be seeing much greater outbreaks than we currently are. And now those same type of things are being applied to other areas, hot spots around the world. Italy, for example, Iran, some of these other places where they are seeing significant outbreaks, we're taking precautionary measures with travel to and from those areas as well. So I'm extremely pleased with the decisions to this point that the administration have been making, and there's no question that the safety of the American people has been the top priority.
Your Senate colleagues from Georgia issued a joint statement saying they're confident in the job that the CDC is doing. What are you hearing from CDC officials?
Yeah, we just had a briefing this morning, and of course we have had a couple of cases show up now in Georgia, and so this is a very important issue for us. Unfortunately, the CDC is located there in Atlanta. But the CDC, obviously, they are working around the clock with other organizations to address this issue as rapidly as possible. I think the number one approach at this point is trying to keep the American people informed as to what's taking place, trying to make sure that people are not panicking over it right now. The briefing this morning, the first words that came to us is that we in America are still at an extremely low risk with coronavirus. That being said, we also know that it's here and that very likely it will be increasing. So we want to minimize fear and panic while at the same time encouraging people to take proper measures of cleanliness and the type of things that would typically be done for flu, for example, to help protect themselves. And then with the CDC and other organizations, they are full steam. They're in full court press to try to find some solutions.
Oh, Congressman, as you just said, some recent cases in Georgia, in your home state. What are you hearing from your constituents there, and what's your message to them?
Well, it's the same message that we're saying right now. Don't panic, but take precautionary measures and stay informed. We are putting up on our website, for example, current information that people can go and find out the latest information as to what's happening, and if there are any breaking news, as it would be for coronavirus. We're trying to do, as an office, all we can to keep our constituents informed. And of course, fortunately, the media is doing a good job right now as well, trying to keep people informed as to what's taking place. But in Georgia, so far, the two cases, as I understand it, the people are doing very well. They're healthy. They are confined in the same household. We expect a full recovery from them, but of course we're going to continue monitoring as more than likely there will be other cases forthcoming.
Well, Congressman, thank you so much. Congressman Jody Hice, Republican from Georgia.
Thank you.
The Catholic Diocese in Portland, Oregon also is weighing in on the coronavirus. Officials there say the faithful can continue to receive Holy Communion on the tongue. The diocese says the risk of transmitting the virus is more or less equal when receiving on the tongue or by the hand, though they are asking extraordinary ministers to wash their hands more frequently. The coronavirus is even affecting the birthplace of Christ. Officials there have indefinitely closed the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem over fears of the illness. The closure comes just weeks before Easter, when tens of thousands of visitors and worshipers flock to the region. The Church of the Nativity is believed to have been built over the birthplace of Christ. A Catholic bishop in the Philippines is asking the government and rebel forces to withdraw from tribal communities. A report says nearly 100 families were forced to flee a village late last month after government troops swept through the area looking for communist rebels. The bishop is asking for peace zones to be established when armed groups would not be allowed to enter. The level of concern for Christian persecution around the world has declined among U.S. Catholics. That is according to a recent survey that is by Aid to the Church in Need. The survey shows U.S. Catholics consider human trafficking, poverty, climate change, and the refugee crisis to be more important than the persecution of Christians. Meanwhile, African countries are facing strong aggression from Islamic terrorists. Last year, hundreds of thousands of people were displaced in Burkina Faso, with Christian communities being targeted the strongest. Alessandro Monteduro, Director of Aid to the Church in Need in Italy, joins us now. Welcome, Alessandro. I know that you just came back from Burkina Faso on Sunday. What's the current situation like there?
But it's the same situation. First of all, it's a pleasure to stay with you this evening. But I was saying, I found the same situation I experienced personally in Iraq the first time in 2014, when I think you can remember 125,000 people were forced to flee their villages after the arrival of the Islamic State. In Burkina Faso, it's happening the same situation, or better, it's a situation worse than Iraq, because we aren't talking of only obviously 125,000 people, but we are talking in only 14 months of a population around about 800,000 people internally displaced. They are now living from their villages from the north of Burkina Faso because a lot of terroristic groups are trying to create a new Islamic caliphate in the Sahel region. The problem is that it's happening in the complete indifference of the Western countries. But daily now, in that part of the Sahel, we are registering a lot of terroristic attacks.
Why do you think people don't always see the severity of global Christian persecution in the world?
But I don't think there isn't the right feeling for the persecution of Christians in the world. I think the virus is the lack of information. There isn't sufficient information. I remember, like the day after, for instance, the past Easter, when we had the terroristic attacks inside churches in Sri Lanka, there was an amazing solidarity of the Catholics all over the world for our brothers in the faith in the same country attacked by terrorists. The problem is that, unfortunately, in the Western countries, it's my perception, there isn't sufficient information because we suffer for the politically correct.
Well, I know the UN reports 4,000 people in Burkina Faso are forced out of their homes every day. How is the Aid to the Church in Need helping these communities?
Like in each country, obviously now we are focusing our operations, our projects also, and above all in Burkina Faso. Humanitarian aid, for instance. Humanitarian aid, I mean that we have to help them trying to create sufficient condition to live in other villages, creating camps for internally displaced, basket food, for example. And at the same time, we always, as Aid to the Church in Need, we combine the humanitarian aid with the pastoral needs. And so also in Burkina Faso, helping the local church, we want to create this synergy.
And in your opinion, Alessandro, how do you think the Western countries can give better support?
Interesting question. I think we have to be more courageous, and we have to create connection between the commercial, the industrial agreement and requests of the respect of the human rights isn't acceptable, and it's also unbearable, for instance, to have in the only European Union relationship, commercial relationship with Pakistan for an amount over the 4 billion euro, and at the same time to allow in Pakistan, what it's happening, for instance, recently with young girls kidnapped, forced to conversion, and to marry their kidnappers. And so the secret and the turning point should be to create this connection between commercial agreement and respect of human rights.
Well, Alessandro Monteduro, thank you so much. Alessandro Monteduro, Director of Aid to the Church in Need in Italy. Thank you again.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Coming up, pro-lifers react to comments made by the Senate Minority Leader following a Supreme Court hearing on abortion. Fireworks on Capitol Hill today. Republicans are criticizing Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, saying that he threatened Justices Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh by name, and for that, he should be officially reprimanded. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales reports for us tonight. Eric?
Well, Tracy, on the front steps of the U.S. Supreme Court yesterday, when the justices were hearing a case involving doctors out of Louisiana that did abortions, Senator Chuck Schumer called out Justices Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, saying, quote, "You've released the whirlwind and you will pay the price." Rushing away after staying just a few minutes, Senator Schumer's words on the steps of the U.S. Supreme Court are having long-lasting effects.
I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind and you will pay the price.
It prompted a rare and swift rebuke from Chief Justice John Roberts himself, who wrote, "Threatening statements of this sort from the highest levels of government are not only inappropriate, they are dangerous." And today, Senator Schumer tried to walk back his comments.
I shouldn't have used the words I did, but in no way was I making a threat. I never would do such a thing.
Republican Senator Josh Hawley announced he was moving to formally censure the minority leader. And talk to me about his reaction afterwards when he said, you know, he didn't mean what he said.
Oh, yeah, whatever. I mean, this is, again, Senator Schumer is a lot of things, but dumb isn't one of them. So he knew exactly what he was doing. He chose those words deliberately. He was playing to the crowd. It was a deliberate piece of political theater, and it was way over the line. And he knew it was. He knew exactly what he was doing.
Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut was also at the Supreme Court yesterday. Today, he refused to comment directly on the Democratic leader's remarks. And should he be censured?
I'm not going to comment beyond that.
Senator Hawley's resolution to censure the minority leader so far already has 14 co-sponsors. Now, it's interesting that that's not all. The chairman of the House Freedom Caucus has also introduced a resolution condemning the words made by the senator. Tracy?
Thank you, Eric. Correspondent Eric Rosales reporting from Capitol Hill. Thank you, Eric. Joining us now is Catherine Hadro, host of ProLife Weekly on EWTN. Catherine, welcome back. So glad to have you here. So what did you make of Senator Schumer's comments?
Wow. That was so divisive, but unfortunately, that kind of angry rhetoric is not surprising coming from these pro-abortion rallies that happen on the steps of the Supreme Court. I mean, it's really when you're on the steps of the Supreme Court at these rallies, the tension between both sides is palpable. But it is dangerous, you know, to stir up that anger and to put that out there. You don't know how people are going to take those comments. I hope the senator apologizes clearly. I think we're going to continue to see calls for that in the coming days. And something I also want to point out is Senator Schumer was really attacking by name Justices Gorsuch and Kavanaugh about this case. But I want to remind the senator and viewers as well, this was not the pro-life side who brought this case to the Supreme Court. This Louisiana case was brought on by the abortion facility. They're the ones who sued. They're the reason why this case is at the high court this week.
Yeah, and I want to ask you, you know, those comments that he made, what kind of message does that send to pro-lifers?
I mean, it does. Again, it's this message of anger, and it seems like intentionally vague, which is very dangerous. So again, like for pro-lifers, we don't want to imitate or mimic that kind of rhetoric. And again, you can see it's the peace in the pro-life movement that it is very visible, even on the steps of the Supreme Court. You know, the day before the Supreme Court case on Wednesday, a pro-life group, Students for Life of America, even held a prayerful vigil. That's the tone. That's truly the pro-life movement. That's that peace and that prayer. And so that's something we need to continue to carry on in the face of this angry rhetoric we're seeing from abortion advocates.
Absolutely. I know that you were at the Supreme Court yesterday for the oral arguments. What was it like being there? What did the lawyers say?
I mean, that was really fascinating, I'll tell you, Tracy, because these Supreme Court oral arguments, they're not televised. It's not like Congress when you can turn on the Senate speeches and watch them and stream them. And so to actually be there in person and to hear the back and forth between the lawyers and the justices, you can really glean a lot of insight into judicial style, judicial reasoning, insight you can't really get from reading the transcripts. So what did the lawyers say? Well, the plaintiff, the side of the abortion provider, they were trying to make this argument that, well, this Louisiana law is identical, they said, quote, identical to the Texas law that the Supreme Court struck down 4 years ago in Hellerstedt. Now, that is actually not true, and there's multiple reasons why that is not true. Now, when it comes to Louisiana, Louisiana's Solicitor General was making the argument there is substantial evidence why this pro-life law is necessary, from safety and health violations, malpractice, even testimony from post-abortive women themselves.
Yeah, well, quickly, I know we don't have much time, but I want to get to your show. Let's talk about tonight.
Yes, well, this week was a huge one for the pro-life movement and with the topic of abortion when it comes to the Supreme Court case. So we speak with Louisiana Attorney General Jeff Landry, Louisiana Solicitor General Liz Morrell, who was the one who argued in the Supreme Court yesterday, and we also have a one-on-one with Senator Mitch McConnell. I mean, he played really a pivotal role when it comes to shaping the court and to the justices there.
Yeah, sounds like an exciting show. Can't wait to watch it. Thank you so much, Catherine.
Thank you, Tracy.
Up next, Pope Francis asked the faithful to pray for Christians in China. The former head of the Diocese of Buffalo suspended a priest who leaked incriminating tapes about him before leaving office late last year. Bishop Richard Malone forbade the priest secretary from celebrating sacraments. The priest had leaked audio recordings that showed Bishop Malone knew about clergy abuse allegations months before acting upon them. Catholic News Agency reports Buffalo's temporary leader is now considering reinstating the priest. 3 attorneys in North Dakota are calling for lawmakers to relax the statute of limitations regarding clergy sexual abuse. The lawyers also want the state's 2 Catholic dioceses to provide more information on accused priests. The dioceses of Fargo and Bismarck released a list of 53 clergy members credibly accused of misconduct. They also have allowed the state's Bureau of Criminal Investigation to review files of all of their other clergy. Pope Francis has named a new leader for the Archdiocese of Atlanta. Bishop Gregory Hartmayer has been Bishop of Savannah, Georgia since 2011. He replaces Archbishop Wilton Gregory, who was appointed to the head of the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C. last year. The Archdiocese of Atlanta has more than 100 parishes and serves around 1.2 million Catholics. Pope Francis invites young people to take risks and give their dreams free rein. In the Holy Father's 2020 message to young people, he asks them to arise and start doing great things. He says beauty awakens passion, and if a young person is passionate about their they face becoming alive again. Each year, the Pope sends out a message to young people and a theme for each year leading up to the International World Youth Day event, which will be next celebrated in Lisbon, Portugal in 2022. Finally, tonight, the Holy Father releases his prayer of intention for the month of March.
La Iglesia quiere que los cristianos chinos sean cristianos en serio.
This month's theme is about Catholics in China. The Holy Father encourages the faithful in the communist country to be truly Christians. He also invites Catholics everywhere to pray for the church in China. In 2018, the Vatican reached an agreement with officials in China over the appointment of bishops. We thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. We're back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night and God bless.